fighting ISIS. President Obama delivers his last major national security speech, what the outgoing leader sees as the best approach to fight extremists. Pentagon investigation. Did the military hide $125 billion in wasteful spending?
We celebrate our diversity.
Arlington, Virginia welcomes its newest bishop, how His Excellency will model the Pope. And preaching beyond the pulpit. These Dominican friars spread the Christmas message through song. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, December 6th, 2016. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thanks to those watching around the world. I'm Lauren Ashburn. We begin tonight in Florida, where President Obama is bolstering his case for continuing his administration's foreign policy strategy, a strategy Donald Trump says failed to protect us from ISIS. On his way out of office, President Obama is making his case for why his ISIS strategy is working.
We believe a sustainable counterterrorism policy can draw upon the lessons of the last 8 years.
He's cut the number of U.S. service members in Iraq and Afghanistan from roughly 180,000 to 15,000. He took out Osama bin Laden. But critics argue the troop reduction allowed ISIS to flourish. Donald Trump was one of those critics. He blamed the president for ISIS's growth.
I mean, he let this happen. They had 8 states, they had 8 countries. They're now in 28 countries. They're expanding.
Trump has said his approach will be different, and he has not ruled out committing boots on the ground in the fight against terror. His policy, peace through strength, will be at the center. He will focus on rebuilding the military and improving intelligence and cyber capabilities, and he pledges to end the current strategy of nation building and regime change. For the first time during the transition, the president-elect addressed reporters today about trimming wasteful spending.
Good morning, how are you?
He says the government should cancel its multi-billion-dollar order for new Air Force One presidential planes.
I think it's ridiculous. I think Boeing is doing a little bit of a number. We want Boeing to make a lot of money, but not that much money.
Well, reports, meanwhile, of waste at the Pentagon are swirling around in the media, but a former Army general is refuting those claims. He says the study in question, which focuses on the Defense Department, is not accurate. Wyatt Goolsbee is here. He joins us with details. You've been knee-deep in that report all day.
Lauren, this study has been very intimidating. It's a 77-page PowerPoint presentation which explains how the Pentagon could cut billions of wasted dollars from front office costs. The problem is the Pentagon says this report is full of flaws and bloated numbers.
The study is called Transforming DoD's Core Business Processes for Revolutionary Change. It allegedly shows $125 billion in waste. In a recent article, the Washington Post claims the Pentagon buried the study amid fears Congress would use the findings as an excuse to slash the defense budget. But a former Army general who used to work at the Pentagon says it's not true.
The baseline they established, if you will, how many people do we have in personnel, was flawed from the beginning.
According to the study, the Pentagon spent almost a quarter of its budget on overhead operations in 2014. Thomas Spohr, who was in charge of the Army's cost management, says the numbers in the study are overblown.
They maybe had a month to do this. And so they had to do things like a word search. And so if they were trying to find people engaged in real property management, they searched on the word engineer. But in the Army, they found combat engineers, people that blow things up, and they counted against our back office functions.
And the Pentagon says it didn't bury anything. Officials say the study had limited value and lacked specifics. With attention on Capitol Hill focused on cutting government waste, Spohr is worried lawmakers may take a flawed report seriously.
There may have been way too many civilians in the Pentagon 5, 6, 7 years ago. Again, they have gone through successive years of cutting to, I think we're really kind of where we should be now in the Pentagon.
General Spohr agrees that the intention of the study was good, streamline bureaucracy, make better use of technology, and cut high-priced contractors. But Lauren, he says this just doesn't do it.
Tell us about the folks who did this study.
Well, this study was prepared by the Defense Business Board, which is a panel of corporate executives. They're based at the Pentagon working with consultants. They normally do reports like this all the time throughout the year. Many that are listed actually just on the Pentagon's website. It's just this one in particular is the one that many are saying is flawed.
All right, Wyatt Goolsby, thank you for your reporting. Trump makes a stop this evening in Fayetteville, North Carolina, as part of his Thank You America tour. His transition team says that retired Marine General James Mathis will travel with him. Trump is expected to formally announce Mattis as his nominee for Secretary of Defense. Senate Democrats urged two of their colleagues to turn down any offers from Donald Trump to serve in his administration. Trump is considering West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin and North Dakota Senator Heidi Heitkamp for his cabinet. If they say yes to a post in the administration, their Senate seats could be lost to Republicans. Senator Manchin met with Trump yesterday and didn't seem to rule out working with the president-elect.
It was a very encouraging talk. We talked about my state of West Virginia and the country as a whole, and it was just a very productive talk, and I was very appreciative of that.
In West Virginia, Democratic Governor Earl Ray Tomblin would appoint someone to the open seat until the next election. In North Dakota, a special election would normally occur within 95 days of the vacancy. Democrats blast the panel investigating Planned Parenthood in a preemptive attack as Republicans finalize their own report. Jason Calvi has a story you'll see here only on EWTN. Jason.
Lauren, dueling reports shoot at the heart of an American controversy. The Democratic members of the Select Panel on Infant Lives just put out their own report. It says the lawmakers have wasted $1.5 million taxpayer dollars.
And the absurd Select Panel investigation amounts to nothing more than a witch hunt.
Democrats slam the House Select Panel investigating Planned Parenthood, fetal tissue donation, and abortion. It was started in response to the undercover videos that shocked the world in 2015 and raised the question, did Planned Parenthood and others break the law by selling fetal body parts? The Democrats' new 112-page report says Planned Parenthood does not profit and actually loses money when it facilitates fetal tissue donation, as do other clinics. Planned Parenthood says the money they received was just reimbursement for things like transporting the fetal samples. Congressman Larry Bouchon is a Republican on the panel.
The other side says this is a sham investigation and a witch hunt. How do you respond to that?
That's absolutely false. The reason they're saying that is because one of their biggest supporters is Planned Parenthood. This is about them trying to defend what I really think is the indefensible. Planned Parenthood and other organizations which are buying and selling fetal body parts.
The Democrats' report says fetal tissue is critical for research into diseases like Alzheimer's and diabetes. They say the undercover videos and following investigations have led to a decrease in fetal samples. Representative Bouchon, also a medical doctor, sees it differently.
We want to make sure that people have access to research materials that they need. We just don't, and I don't, believe that needs to be from aborted fetuses.
The Democrats' report says there's no evidence any patients were misled or coerced to donate their child's body to research. But now KRQE-TV reports that an Albuquerque woman sued an abortion clinic claiming she had an abortion but wasn't fully informed about what would happen to her aborted baby's tissue when she agreed to donate it to science. Lauren?
Jason Calvi on Capitol Hill. Thank you, Jason. Vice President Joe Biden presides over the Senate as it considers more money for medical research. Lawmakers named a provision of the bill in honor of Biden's son, who died of cancer.
Renaming the NIH's cancer initiatives in this bill after Beau Biden.
Without objection.
Called the Cancer Moonshot bill, it would include $1.8 billion to seek a cure for cancer. And joining us now is Janet Marchibroda, Director of Health Innovation at the Bipartisan Policy Center. Thanks so much for joining us.
It's great to be with you, Lauren.
You know, this 21st Century Cures Act has been called the most significant piece of legislation this session. What distinguishes it from other funding bills? Is it just the amount of money?
Lauren, I think it goes further than the amount of money. What's so exciting about this bill and what makes it so significant is the fact that it's comprehensive. It will help bring cures and treatments to patients across our country, and it's bipartisan. It's 2 years in the making. A tremendous amount of collaboration among Republicans and Democrats, both in the House and the Senate.
And that's why we have you here from the Bipartisan Policy Center. Opioid abuse is a really big problem, and it's growing here in the United States. Does this bill address drug addiction or other mental health issues?
Actually, it does. So in addition to accelerating cures and treatments, there's a whole section, about $1 billion, in funding to states to address the opioid epidemic. Also, in addition to that, there are a number of mental health provisions that are very important to treat behavioral health disorders.
That happen after your drug abuse or drug use, or because as a result of, or even leading up to drug abuse, I would imagine. Now, critics say that the lobbyists were just too involved in all of this, in the writing of this bill. Is that true?
Well, I'll tell you, again, I mentioned this was 2-3 years in the making, and there were a number of groups that were supporting this, about 700 groups, patient groups. And we've seen patient groups across the country get very involved in making sure that their voices are heard, and when their lives are on the line, it really matters.
So, you know, even though the lobbyists were involved, you're saying that, you know, and doing what lobbyists do, you're saying that the ends justifies the means in this case. You know, the other thing is that new technologies and groundbreaking drugs are really great if you have access to them, and that's a big problem. Does this bill improve patient access?
Absolutely, and I'm glad you asked that. There are a number of things in the bill. There are provisions around compassionate use, forcing drug companies to make those policies publicly available.
Meaning that they can't up the price of an EpiPen because nobody else is in the market? Is that the kind of thing we're talking about?
I think we'll see more legislation on affordability of medicines and value-based medicines in the coming year. Here in the 21st Century Cures Act, there are a number of provisions that help patients get access to drugs for rare diseases, for superbugs,
right,
and things, and even regenerative medicine in this bill.
It's fascinating, and I can't wait to see the fruits of everyone's labor. Janet Marchibroda, Director of Health Innovation at the Bipartisan Policy Center. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Lauren.
Coming up, no you can't. The president of Iran tells Donald Trump not to rip up the nuclear deal when he takes office. And Arlington, Virginia's new bishop, Michael Burbidge, tells me how Pope Francis inspires him. The parable of the lost sheep. In his homily this morning, the Holy Father says the Lord never stops looking for us. He added he does not come to condemn, but to save, and he knows us by name and loves us for who we are. We are just learning that hundreds of kidnapped Christians have been saved from ISIS by a bishop. He's with the Assyrian Church, one of the oldest Christian communities in the world, and he's raised millions of dollars in ransom money. 226 people were kidnapped by ISIS in February of 2015. It took more than a year and the killing of 3 captives before the rest were freed. A California-based filmmaker visited his homeland after hearing this story, and he helped the bishop negotiate with ISIS and raise $11 million.
We don't regret breaking this law, especially when the governments are not doing anything about it. You know, they're just putting guidelines on us. It's like, well, how about the lives of these people?
The remaining captives were released in February. It's not known how much of that money, how much ransom, was paid. The president of Iran says the country won't let President-elect Donald Trump rip up the nuclear deal when he takes office. Iran and 6 other countries, including the U.S., reached the deal last year to lift sanctions in exchange for limits on Iran's nuclear program. Trump has criticized this deal and vowed to renegotiate it, but President Hassan Rouhani says he will not let that happen. Big showdown. Catholics in Arlington, Virginia have a new leader. Per tradition, Bishop Michael Burbidge knocked 3 times, a symbol of the Trinity, on his new cathedral door before his installation mass. The Mass took place at his cathedral, the Cathedral of St. Thomas More. During his homily, Bishop Burbidge remembered his mother and talked about his diocese's patron saint.
Dear friends in Christ, dear Diocese of Arlington, more than ever in these unsettling times, we are called to imitate the witness of St. Thomas More, the witness to our faith that we proudly profess.
Burbidge becomes only the 4th bishop of Arlington. His installation Mass was broadcast live this afternoon on EWTN. And Bishop Burbidge inherits a very diverse diocese filled with different cultures. I learned this yesterday as I sat down with him to talk about his new mission. Here in the Arlington diocese, you have such a diverse population. I know this from just living across the river. You have a large Hispanic population. You have a Vietnamese population, Korean, and many, many others. How do you plan on making all of those different followers as one?
Yes, and actually the Diocese of Arlington is really the face of the United States. The same thing in Raleigh. We are just a very diverse church, and we celebrate our diversity, always leading to our unity as brothers and sisters in Christ. And so throughout the year, there are multiple occasions where we lift up the different cultures, the different backgrounds, the different ethnic communities, and celebrate them. Because that's important. The gifts, the background, the history that different cultures bring to a church, a local church, are to be welcomed and embraced and celebrated.
There is one absolute truth, and that is life begins at conception. There are many politicians who are Catholic, including Tim Kaine, who was the vice presidential nominee for Hillary Clinton, who do not espouse that view, yet say that they're Catholic and attend Mass. How do you bring them into the fold?
Bishops around the country are doing such a great job with this, and many times it's behind the scenes. It's not made known, it's not made public, but you have those opportunities to speak to elected officials, and you have that great chance to say, can I just speak with you a little bit? Here's what the church teaches, and here's why the church teaches. Now, how can I help you to understand how important it is for you, entrust it with the common good, to embrace that? And many times there is steps forward. And I think that, so we never give up on that. So often we hear, I believe that personally.
Right.
Right.
And how, that is a really hard pill to swallow.
It is. It is. You know, if that is your belief and that's your conviction, then you have to bring that to the public.
It should be 100%
right.
Your belief.
Yes. So we persevere and we don't give up, and we welcome the opportunities to speak. And many times I've had that great privilege of speaking to those who carry that burden of, you know, carrying out an office, representing the people. And, you know, the conversation in private is much different. And you see the struggle, you see the wrestling. And so how can I as a bishop, how can I as a teacher help you with that?
You have a good relationship with the Pope. He is a very pastoral Pope. How have you learned from him?
Yes, have learned from him and inspired every day by him. And often when I visit the schools, I ask, why is it everyone loves our Pope? And they tell me why. Because he's humble, because he's joyful, because he loves being with the people, because he seems respectful of all persons. And I think he's teaching us how to dialogue.
Up next, kids' shoes filled with candy, how the patron saint of children became the model for Santa Claus. And watch out, Beyonce. The Dominican Friars have a new album just in time for Christmas. Children love today's feast day celebrating St. Nicholas. Many around the world find their shoes filled with candy. His storied history of throwing gold coins through poor people's windows began the legend of Santa Claus. Mary Shevlin joins us from Rome on this feast day of St. Nicholas. Tell us, what do we know about him?
Lauren, we have to remember behind the figure of Santa Claus is a real Catholic bishop, St. Nicholas, who was born in what is now modern-day Turkey, but was, of course, back then part of the Roman Empire. He was a bishop there. He was known for his great generosity, and the story that we're probably all familiar with if you've studied his life is that he went in the evening, very hidden, and would give bags of money or gold to needy families. And one such family was a father looking for a dowry for his 3 daughters. They were destitute, poverty, and his simple, humble, hidden gift made it possible for them to get married. And he was known for many, many cases like this, and so he became the patron saint of generosity and, of course, of children.
Well, then how did we go from St. Nicholas, the bishop, to Santa Claus?
There are so many traditions, as we know. Many of us being immigrants in the United States, we can all remember the traditions of our ancestors. But the actual name Santa Claus probably comes from the Dutch derivation of their Sinterklaas. And then when they came to the United States in the 1700s, of course, their Sinterklaas came with them, as did their traditions. And of course, over the years, that has now become Santa Claus, of course, deriving from the name Saint Nicholas.
Our White House operations manager this morning posted this picture of his kids' shoes filled with candy. Where did that tradition come from?
You know, not a lot of us in the U.S. celebrate that feast, but it is pretty widespread here in Europe. The Feast of St. Nicholas is a huge day for kids all over Europe, and I think throughout the world. The tradition is that because St. Nicholas would go through the night and quietly distribute charity and gifts and his generosity, that the tradition was that he would leave his good fortune in the shoes that were left outside. Now, children were taught not to be greedy, so we have the tradition of just leaving one shoe outside, and now as we hang one stocking from our fireplaces, for example.
And I love that the candy cane also comes from the bishop's staff. Mary Shevlin, reporting from Rome, thank you so much.
Thank you, Lauren.
Well, they're hitting all the right notes right in time for Christmas. Tonight, we meet a group of friars who are finding new ways to preach the good news. Our Mark Irons reports.
The Dominicans, a religious order of preachers founded 800 years ago, now available on iTunes.
The album reached actually number 21 on the iTunes classical album chart. So that's pretty high for us.
People might be interested in what we have going on.
At the Dominican House of Studies in Washington, D.C., these friars have been perfecting and packaging their sound.
It's a talented group of friars. This is the 4th album that they've produced.
Their latest creation, a 16-track Christmas album.
People love Christmas, and people love Christmas music.
It took a lot of practice.
At least 50 hours. Really? Singing.
Recording and engineering.
We basically run our own label here. We call it Dominicana Records.
But a group of preachers in the record business? Brother Justin Bolger had his own record deal in Nashville before joining the Dominicans in 2012. He says the music produced here fits with the mission.
The Dominican order was founded to preach for the salvation of souls. So that's our main mission, is to preach, whether that's in a conference or the classroom or most importantly at Mass. But music is sort of an indirect way of preaching. You're offering something beautiful that hopefully draws the listener in.
A new form of preaching for $9.99. All proceeds go to the formation of these student brothers, trained to go out and preach the truth.
The truth that this album conveys is that Christ was born to save.
Mark Irons, EWTN News Nightly.
And for all of us here at the EWTN News Nightly team, to all of you around the world, happy Feast of St. Nicholas. I'm Lauren Ashburn, and I'll see you again tomorrow night. Good night, and God bless.